It was meant to be a simple, if tense, introductory dinner, but it detonated in a way I never could have predicted. My son's fiancée had just introduced me as just a retired mom, enjoying her quiet years. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. But when her mother, a woman who carried herself with the unmistakable authority of a career in law enforcement, laid eyes on me, she turned ghost white, grabbed her daughter's arm, and hissed, "Do you have any idea who you're dealing with?" The betrayal I felt collided with a sense of impending justice. And I knew in that instant that one single truth was about to unravel the entire evening. The wedding, and someone's carefully constructed future. "Mom, I'm getting married." The novel I was reading slipped from my grasp, landing with a muffled thump on the thick Persian rug beside my favorite armchair. Leo stood silhouetted against the flickering light of the fireplace, his hands nervously twisting a piece of jewelry that glinted in the warm glow. It was a man's engagement ring, platinum and understated, but one I had certainly never seen before. "To whom?" I managed to ask, my voice sounding much calmer than the sudden tempest in my chest. "I don't think I've even heard you mention anyone special." He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, a nervous habit from childhood that had suddenly reappeared. The ring spun around his finger, a frantic, shining orbit. "Her name is Brenda Harper. And you're right, you haven't met her yet." "Yet?" He said the word as if it were a comfort, a small detail that somehow improved a situation that felt monumentally worse with each passing second. I bent down, picked up my book, and placed it on the side table with deliberate precision, buying myself a moment to process the shockwave that had just hit my quiet, orderly life. Leo was wearing the tailored suit he saved for major client presentations. He had planned this, armored himself for this conversation. "How long have you two been together?" I asked, though the way he fidgeted already telegraphed an answer I knew I wouldn't like. 2 weeks, the words tumbled out. A fast and defensive confession. "But Mom, I know how it sounds. It's real. This is real love." 2 weeks? I pushed myself out of the armchair, my reading glasses sliding down my nose. "Leo, people do not get engaged after 2 weeks. They barely know each other's coffee orders after 2 weeks." He took a step closer to the fireplace, his hand gripping the marble mantelpiece. A lifetime of family photos stared down at us from their silver frames. Leo's first day of school, family vacations to the lake, his college graduation, moments that had taken decades to build, now seemingly eclipsed by 14 days with a complete stranger. "You always do this," he said, his voice sharpening with frustration. "You analyze everything like it's a closing argument. Not every part of life needs to be cross-examined, Mom. When my only son announces he's marrying a woman I've never met, yes, it absolutely does." The ring on his finger caught the firelight again as he gestured in exasperation. It was a simple band, but I could tell the metal was high quality, the design expensive, far too expensive for a whirlwind romance, unless this Brenda was either incredibly wealthy or dangerously impulsive. "Brenda makes me happy," he continued, his voice softening. "Happier than I've been in years. Isn't that what matters?" "Happy is wonderful, Leo. Marriage is a permanent contract." He let out a short, humorless laugh. "Nothing's permanent anymore, Mom. You, of all people, should know that." The jab about my divorce from his father 8 years ago landed exactly as he'd intended. It was a fair point, but horribly timed. "That's precisely why you shouldn't rush into..." "Into what?" he cut in. "A chance at something real? At love?" He grabbed his coat from the back of a chair, a clear signal that this conversation was over. "You want to control every part of my life, just like you controlled every case that ever crossed your desk. I want to protect you." "From what?" "From being happy?" The silence that followed stretched between us, thick and heavy, punctuated only by the soft, rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Through the windows, I could hear the distant drone of evening traffic, the soundtrack of other people returning to their predictable, stable lives. Leo's shoulders slumped. Look, I didn't come here to start a fight. I came to share my good news, and to ask if you would meet her. Of course, I want to meet her, I said. The prosecutor in me added silently, asterisk, and I want to know everything there is to know about her. Asterisk. Good. He adjusted his coat, then twisted the ring again. We could have dinner, somewhere nice. Tomorrow's too soon. But what about Monday? Monday gives me the weekend, I thought, to prepare my questions. Gibson's Bar and Steakhouse downtown? 7? It was a notoriously expensive choice. Either he was trying to impress me, or Brenda was the kind of woman who expected that level of extravagance. I'll make the reservation, I said. He nodded, and I saw some of the tension leave his shoulders. You'll like her, Mom. She's confident, successful, ambitious. Confident, successful, ambitious, and engaged to my son after knowing him for 2 weeks. In my experience, people who moved that quickly were either running from a past they wanted to bury or chasing a future they felt they didn't deserve. I'm sure I will, I lied smoothly. He moved toward the front door, his shoes echoing on the hardwood floors. Brenda's excited to meet you too. She's heard so much about you. That stopped me cold. What exactly has she heard? Just that you're my mom. That you're retired now, enjoying a quiet life. He paused at the door, his hand on the brass knob. I didn't mention what you used to do. Figured that could come up naturally. Smart boy. He knew as well as I did that the title former state's attorney changed the atmosphere in a room. It made some people guarded and others falsely casual. But it changed everyone. See you Monday then, he said, opening the door. A cool September breeze drifted in, carrying the scent of damp earth and the first hints of autumn. He stepped out onto the porch, then turned back. Mom, please. Just try to give her a chance. I nodded, though we both knew that in my world, giving someone a chance and thoroughly investigating them were not mutually exclusive concepts. The door clicked shut, leaving me alone with my thoughts and a very expensive dinner reservation to secure. Saturday morning found me in my home office, a mug of coffee growing cold on the desk as I stared at the wall of family photos. There was Leo at 7, gap-toothed and beaming with his first soccer trophy. 16, looking mortified as I took his picture before his junior prom. 25, raising a glass of champagne to celebrate his first big promotion. Nowhere in that visual history was there a Brenda Harper. I had spent a restless night tossing and turning, replaying my conversation with Leo, dissecting his words and expressions as if they were evidence in a complex case file. 2 weeks. That timeline felt wrong. A glaring inconsistency in the story of my cautious, thoughtful son. In my 30 years as a prosecutor, I developed a sharp instinct for people who move too fast, and it was rarely for innocent reasons. My notebook lay open on the desk, containing only 3 lines of information. Asterisk. Brenda Harper. Works in tech. Divided by IT. Engaged to Leo after 2 weeks. Asterisk. It was a pathetically small amount of data on the woman who was about to become my daughter-in-law. My phone rang at precisely 10 a.m. Mom? Leo's voice sounded smaller than it had the other night, the bravado replaced with a hint of uncertainty. I wanted to call and apologize. I got defensive. You don't need to apologize for defending someone you care about, I said, settling back into my desk chair. I watched my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, walking her ancient golden retriever, a comforting slice of the normal Saturday morning routine Leo used to be part of. I know this all seems sudden, he continued. I know how it must look from your perspective. How does it look from yours, Leo? There was a pause. Like the best thing that's ever happened to me. The conviction in his voice was genuine, which somehow made the situation feel even more precarious. True believers were always the hardest to reason with. Tell me more about her, I said, picking up my pen. What does she do in tech? She's a project manager at some big software firm. They do IT solutions for corporate clients. He was warming to the topic now, eager to present his case. She's incredibly smart, Mom. And she's funny. She makes me laugh every single day. I jotted down project manager. In my notebook, a title so vague it could mean almost anything. What about her family? Her background? Her parents live out in the suburbs too. Naperville area. Her dad's a retired financial planner. And her mom, actually, her mom's retired from the police force. You two might have something in common, retired police. That was an interesting detail. Law enforcement families often raised children who either rebelled fiercely against authority or embraced it wholeheartedly. Given Brenda's rush to the altar, I was leaning toward the former. And her last name is Harper? I confirmed. Yes, Brenda Harper, he said, spelling it for me as if I might forget. Her middle name is Anne, if you're keeping a file on her. He knew me too well. What made you say yes so quickly? I asked, finally voicing the question that had been bothering me the most. Another pause. This one, longer. Have you ever met someone and just felt like you'd been waiting for them your whole life? Yes, I had. His father. 34 years ago. That relationship had given me Leo and lasted 18 years before it imploded with spectacular finality. But pointing that out now would only make him dig in his heels. I have, I said instead. Then you get it. Brenda and I, we just fit, like two pieces of a puzzle that have been searching for each other. I glanced at the photo of him on his graduation day, remembering the speech he gave about taking his time, about not settling. The cautious young man in that picture seemed a world away from the one on the phone. So, Monday night, I said, steering the conversation back to safer territory. 7 at Gibson's. She's really looking forward to it. She wants to make a good impression. I'm sure she does. Mom, be nice. I'm always nice. He laughed. And for a moment, he sounded like the old Leo. You're always polite. That's not the same thing. A fair point. My prosecutorial politeness could often be more unnerving than open hostility. I'll be on my best behavior, I promised. Thank you. And Mom, don't Google her beforehand. Please, give her a chance to introduce herself on her own terms. The request caught me by surprise. Why would you assume I'd... Because I know you, he interrupted gently. Because you probably already have a notebook open with her name written at the top of the page. I looked down at the open notebook on my desk and felt a familiar, bittersweet pang of pride. My son knew me well. I'll see you Monday, I said, neither confirming nor denying his accusation. After we hung up, I confirmed our table for 3 at 7, requesting a quiet booth with a clear view of the dining room. Brenda Harper. The name echoed in my mind. Something about it felt familiar, a faint bell ringing in the distant archives of my memory. It was probably nothing. Harper was a common enough name, and in 3 decades of prosecuting criminals, I had encountered thousands of them. Still, the feeling persisted as I closed my notebook and went downstairs to make myself a proper breakfast. I had 2 days until I met the woman who wanted to marry my son. 2 days to prepare the right questions. Gibson's buzzed with the electric energy of a Monday night in downtown Chicago. Deals were being made over steak and martinis. The soft clinking of expensive silverware a constant hum beneath the murmur of conversation. I had arrived 15 minutes early, securing our corner booth. Old habits from my days at the courthouse died hard. Always control your environment when you can. At 7:10, I saw Leo in the doorway. He was wearing a dark blue suit, and his arm was linked through that of a tall, striking woman in a sleek black dress. Even from across the crowded room, I could see the confidence in her posture, the proprietary way she surveyed the restaurant. Brenda Harper. The moment I saw her face, that nagging sense of familiarity clicked into place, sharper and more insistent. I couldn't place it, but I knew I had seen those sharp, intelligent features somewhere before. "Sorry we're late," Leo said as they approached the table, his cheeks slightly flushed. "Traffic was a nightmare." "No problem at all," I said, standing to greet them. I extended my hand to Brenda. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you." Her handshake was firm, almost aggressively so. "Catherine, the pleasure is all mine. Leo has told me so much about you. All good things, I hope." "Oh, absolutely," she said with a practiced smile. "The kind I'd seen on countless defendants trying to charm a jury." "He says you're enjoying your retirement. It must be nice to have all that time on your hands." We settled into the booth, Brenda making a show of letting Leo help her with her coat. The gesture was smooth, rehearsed. "What line of work are you in, Brenda?" I asked, as the waiter handed us our menus. "I'm in various projects," she said vaguely, her eyes already scanning the wine list. Consulting mostly. You know how it is, corporate solutions, business optimization. Nothing too exciting." Her description was a smokescreen. In my experience, people who couldn't clearly describe their jobs often had something to hide. "And you, Catherine?" Brenda looked up from her menu, her familiar features arranged in a mask of polite interest. "What did you do before you retired?" "I was a prosecutor," I said simply, "at the state's attorney's office." The change in her expression was subtle but immediate. A brief tightening around her eyes, a fractional stiffening of her shoulders. Most people had one of two reactions to my former profession: respect or nervousness. Brenda's was undeniably the latter. "A prosecutor," she repeated, her smile now looking as if it were painted on. "That must have been intense." "It had its moments," I replied, just as the waiter reappeared, saving her from having to comment further. She ordered the most expensive steak on the menu and a bottle of wine that cost more than a week's worth of groceries. I chose the salmon, and I didn't miss the slight lift of her eyebrows at my more modest selection. "So, how did you two meet?" I asked once the waiter departed. Leo launched into an animated story about a chance encounter at a coffee shop, how Brenda had offered to share her table during the lunch rush, how they'd ended up talking for hours. He glowed as he spoke, his hand finding hers across the white linen tablecloth. Brenda listened with the placid expression of someone hearing a favorite story, nodding at all the right moments, but her eyes kept flicking back to me, as if she were trying to gauge my reaction, to solve a puzzle. "Leo mentioned your parents live in the area," I said when his story wound down. "That's right, Naperville," she confirmed. "Dad's a retired financial planner. Mom was on the police force, a very traditional family setup. A retired cop for a mother and a daughter who couldn't give a straight answer about her career. The pieces weren't fitting together." Our appetizers arrived, giving me another moment to study her. The expensive dress, the confident air, the way she commanded attention, it was all a carefully constructed performance designed to project success. But just beneath that polished surface, I sensed an undercurrent of something else. Anxiety, perhaps. Or guilt. "You know," Brenda said suddenly, slicing into her shrimp cocktail, "it's funny meeting you like this. Here's Leo with his successful career, his close family." She gestured vaguely with her fork. "And then there's you, enjoying your golden years. All that empty space to fill." The insult, delivered with such surgical precision, landed squarely. Asterisk. Empty space asterisk. As if my entire life, my career, my very existence, had been reduced to simply killing time. Leo's eyes widened. "Brenda." "No, It's all right, I said, my voice carefully level. I felt the familiar calm of the courtroom settling over me, the practiced ability to absorb a personal attack without flinching. Retirement does offer a great deal more flexibility. Exactly. Brenda smiled, pleased with her point. It must be so liberating, not having any real responsibilities anymore. Another calculated jab, designed to frame me as irrelevant in my son's life. I caught Leo's apologetic gaze and gave him the slightest of nods to signal that I was fine. But I wasn't fine. In the span of 20 minutes, Brenda Harper had revealed herself to be evasive, nervous about my past, and comfortable insulting me. The nagging feeling of recognition intensified. I knew this woman. Tell me about your plans, I said, changing the subject. Have you set a date for the wedding? Soon, Brenda answered, taking a large sip of wine. Life's too short to wait around, right? When you know, you know. How soon is soon? We're thinking November. Leo jumped in quickly. Just a small ceremony, close family. 6 weeks. The timeline was even more compressed than I'd realized. Our main courses arrived. As the waiter placed Brenda's $40 steak in front of her, she made a show of examining it with exaggerated approval. Now times this asterisk, she announced. Cutting into the fillet with theatrical flair is how a steak should be. Perfectly marbled. She glanced at my portion of salmon with barely veiled condescension. Though I suppose fish is lighter. Better for the digestion at your age. The comment was a small, sharp slap. I gripped my napkin under the table, feeling the familiar tightening in my jaw that I had learned to master during decades of cross-examinations. The salmon here is excellent, Leo said quickly, shooting Brenda a warning look that she completely ignored. Oh, I'm sure it is. She waved her fork dismissively. But there's something about a real piece of meat that just energizes you. Keeps you sharp. Active. She took another bite with theatrical relish. Of course, that probably matters less when your most strenuous activity for the day is reading a book. I continued to cut my fish with methodical precision, each slice identical to the last. It was an old prosecutorial habit. When under attack, maintain your routine. Brenda. Leo's voice was sharp now. Maybe we could talk about something else. What? We're just having a conversation, she said, leaning back in her chair. Her voice was loud enough that the couple at the next table glanced over. I think it's great that your mom has found her, what do you call it? Her groove? In retirement? Very zen. Very accepting of life's natural progression. Asterisk? Natural progression? Asterisk. As if I'd already been put out to pasture. The wine was making Brenda bolder. Her voice carried, drawing more looks from other diners, professional types, people who understood the currency of discretion. Brenda seemed oblivious. You know what I love about my generation? She said, gesturing broadly with her wine glass. We don't accept limitations. We innovate. We push boundaries. She fixed me with a smile that was anything but friendly. Not like the older generation. Always so focused on how things used to be. Always living in the past. Mom, Leo's voice was tight with embarrassment. Maybe we should. The past, Brenda interrupted, her laugh too loud for the elegant space. That's where all the wisdom is supposed to be, right? Except the world moved on while you were busy collecting it. She took another large gulp of wine. Times are changing, Catherine. And the older generation just can't keep up. The words hung in the air like acrid smoke. Around us, other conversations had fallen quiet. Diners were openly watching us now. Sensing the drama, I set down my fork with careful deliberation. That's an interesting perspective, I said quietly. But Brenda, emboldened by what she clearly mistook for weakness, pressed on. Don't get me wrong, I respect experience, but there comes a time when you have to step aside and let the people who actually understand the modern world take the lead. She gestured between herself and Leo. Let the next generation build something meaningful, instead of just existing, asterisk, existing, asterisk. As if my 3 decades of public service, my conviction rate, my entire career, amounted to nothing more than taking up space. Leo's face had gone pale. "Brenda, stop." "Stop what? I'm just being honest." She laughed again, that grating sound designed to broadcast her dominance. "Honesty is refreshing, don't you think, Catherine? Better than pretending everything's fine when really you're just marking time until enough." The single word, spoken quietly, but with the full force of my authority, sliced through her monologue like a blade. Brenda's mouth snapped shut. Something in my tone had finally penetrated her wine-fueled arrogance. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. I folded my napkin with the same methodical precision I once used to organize case files, placed it beside my plate, and looked directly at Brenda Harper. I truly looked at her, with the full weight of every courtroom battle, every conviction, every criminal I had ever put behind bars. "Leo," I said, my voice calm, but carrying an authority that made Brenda's eyes widen. "Would you mind stepping outside with me for a moment?" Brenda blinked, smug confidence replaced by confusion. "Outside? But we haven't finished our—" "The grown-ups need to talk," I said, my eyes still fixed on my son. The insult was deliberate, precise, a mirror of the tactics she had used all evening. Her face flushed a deep red, but for once, she was speechless. Leo's hands trembled slightly as he placed his own napkin on the table. "Mom, I don't think—" "Please." Something in my voice made him nod. We stood together, leaving Brenda sitting alone at the table, her expensive steak growing cold, under the curious gaze of the entire restaurant. The walk to the door felt endless. We passed tables of professionals who averted their eyes, waiters who stepped aside with knowing glances, and a hostess who offered a tight, professional smile. The cool September air was a relief after the suffocating tension inside. The city hummed around us, distant traffic, the wail of a siren, the ordinary sounds of a Monday night. We stopped near the valet stand, far enough from the entrance to speak freely. "What was that?" Leo's voice shook with a mixture of anger and embarrassment. "What just happened in there? That was your fiancée showing her true colors." "Her true colors?" He spun to face me. "You mean being nervous about meeting my mother for the first time? You mean having a little too much to drink?" "Leo, that woman spent the entire dinner insulting me to my face. She was trying to make conversation. You're the one who sat there like a judge on the bench, analyzing every single word she said." The comparison stung because it was partly true. But 30 years of reading people, of separating truth from deception, of protecting the innocent from predators, that instinct doesn't just switch off when you retire. "I don't like her, Leo," I said simply. His laugh was sharp and bitter. "You don't like her? You've decided you don't like the woman I'm going to marry after one dinner? After watching her disrespect you, disrespect me, and lie about everything from her job to her intentions." "Lie about what?" "What lies, Mom?" "It consulting. Various projects." "Leo, the woman can't give a straight answer about how she earns a living, because not everyone spends their life interrogating people." The words hit me harder than any of Brenda's insults. I felt something inside me crack. "Is that what you think I did? Interrogate people, didn't you?" Tears were welling in his eyes, but his voice was steady. "Isn't that exactly what you're doing right now? Putting my girlfriend on trial? Because she doesn't measure up to your impossible standards? My standards include basic respect and honesty, and she is your fiancée, not your girlfriend. Your standards include control." The tears were falling now, but his anger burned hotter. "You can't stand that I'm independent. You can't stand that I made a choice, a huge choice, without consulting you first. This isn't about your independence. Then what is it about?" He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a fierce whisper. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you can't handle the fact that your little boy grew up and doesn't need his mommy's permission anymore." The city noise faded into the background. A light rain had begun to fall, creating halos around the streetlights. "I love her, Mom." His voice cracked. "For the first time in my life, I found someone who makes me feel whole. And instead of being happy for me, you're trying to tear it all down." "Leo, that's not true." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "I'm 32 years old. I don't need you to protect me from my own decisions. Not even when those decisions are mistakes." He fumbled in his pocket for his phone, his hands shaking as he ordered a ride. Especially not then. The rain was coming down harder now. I watched my son, this fierce, brilliant man I had raised, preparing to walk away from me for a woman who had treated us both with such contempt. "Leo, please, just listen to me for 1 second. "I'm done listening," he said, his eyes fixed on his phone. "I'm done with your suspicions and your interrogations and your need to control my life. I'm trying to protect you." "From what? From being happy?" He looked up as a car pulled to the curb, then turned to face me one last time. "You know what, Mom? For someone who spent her entire career fighting for justice, you have absolutely no trust in people to make their own choices." The car door slammed with a finality that echoed between the tall buildings. I stood in the growing rain, watching the taillights disappear into the Chicago night, leaving me alone with the weight of every word I should have said differently. Inside the restaurant, Brenda Harper was probably finishing her steak, already spinning a story about how Leo's controlling mother had ruined their lovely evening, and I was left with the chilling thought that maybe, for the first time in my life, I had prosecuted the wrong person. The coffee maker gurgled to life at 6:30 a.m., a full 2 hours before my usual routine. I had abandoned any hope of sleep around 4, after a long night spent replaying our argument, pinpointing every moment where a different word, a different choice, might have changed the outcome. My reflection in the dark kitchen window looked haggard. I was still wearing the wrinkled silk blouse from dinner, looking exactly like the person Brenda Harper had described. A tired old woman living in the past. The first sip of coffee was scalding, but I barely noticed. By 8 a.m., I was pacing through the house, my phone in my hand, my thumb hovering over Leo's contact information. The family photos in the hallway seemed to mock me. Leo at 5, so trusting. At 16, rolling his eyes but still letting me take his picture. At 25, hugging me tight at his graduation. When had I become the villain in his story? The call went to voicemail after 4 rings. His voice, bright and professional, filled the silence. "You've reached Leo Reynolds. Please leave a message." I hung up without speaking. 10 minutes later, I tried again. Same result. This time, I forced myself to leave a message. "Leo, it's Mom. Please, please just call me back." The words felt hollow and inadequate. 30 years of courtroom eloquence, gone. I retreated to my office, sinking into the leather chair where I had spent countless hours preparing cases, building arguments that had shaped people's lives. Now, I couldn't even construct a simple apology for my own son. The morning news droned on from the television in the corner, but my eyes were fixed on my phone, willing it to ring. When it remained silent, I dialed again. "Leo, I'm so sorry. I worry about you. Please forgive me." The second voicemail felt even more pathetic than the first. By noon, I had called 6 times. The progression of my messages was a documentary of my own unraveling, from controlled concern to barely contained desperation. "I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. I handled that all wrong. Leo, please. I'm not trying to control your life. I'm trying to understand it. Maybe you're right. Maybe I don't trust people. But I trust you, Leo. I have always trusted you." Each unanswered call felt like a door slamming shut. The afternoon stretched on, A vast and empty expanse of time. I tried to eat lunch, but the food tasted like ash. I tried to read, but the words on the page were a meaningless jumble. By 4 o'clock, I started composing text messages I couldn't bring myself to send. Asterisk Leo, I am so sorry about last night. Asterisk, delete. Asterisk, please call me when you have a moment. Asterisk, delete. Asterisk, I love you. Asterisk, delete. The blinking cursor on the empty screen felt like an accusation. By 6 p.m., the silence in the house was unbearable. I called one last time, knowing he wouldn't answer, knowing I was probably only making things worse. I love you, sweetheart. I whispered into the phone, whatever you decide, I will support you. Just, please, talk to me. The words came out broken, the desperate plea of a mother to her son's voicemail. I set the phone on my desk and stared out the window as the September sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and amber. They were the same colors that used to be in Leo's hair when he was a little boy, running to greet me at the door when I came home from work. Now, he wouldn't even return my calls. The phone stayed silent all evening. Maybe Brenda Harper was right. Maybe I was just empty space now. A relic from a time when a mother's instinct was seen as protection, not control. Or maybe, for the first time in my professional life, I had cross-examined the wrong witness. Tomorrow, I told myself as I lay in bed, staring at the dark ceiling. Tomorrow he'll call. But even as I formed the words, I knew they were a lie. Leo had his father's stubbornness and his mother's pride. He wouldn't be calling tomorrow, or the day after. I had won my last case decades ago. This one, the only one that truly mattered. I felt I had already lost. By the 3rd week of October, I had perfected the art of invisible surveillance. Parked across the street from Brenda's sleek Streeterville high-rise, the engine running to keep the autumn chill at bay, I watched my son's new morning routine through the fogged-up car windows. 7:45 a.m. Like clockwork, Leo would emerge from the revolving doors in a tailored overcoat, coffee in one hand, briefcase in the other. He never once glanced toward my car. The first week after our fight, my attempts at contact had been clumsy and obvious. Phone calls every few hours, flowers delivered to Brenda's address, which were undoubtedly thrown out. Awkward visits where I would stand in the pristine, soulless lobby, only to be told by the doorman that Mr. Reynolds was not accepting visitors. Brenda had put a stop to that quickly. A text from a number I didn't recognize buzzed on my phone one afternoon. Asterisk, stay away from our home. Or, I'm getting a restraining order. Asterisk, October had settled over Chicago with its usual damp chill. I'd spent most of it learning the geography of my son's new life. The coffee shop he favored, the dry cleaner he used, and the grocery store where we had our most painful encounter. It was a Saturday afternoon at a Mariano's. 2 weeks into my campaign of quiet observation, I was selecting avocados when I spotted him in the produce section, his brow furrowed with the same focused concentration he'd had as a boy building model airplanes. For a wonderful, fleeting moment, I forgot we weren't speaking. Leo! He looked up, and for an instant, his face lit up with automatic recognition. Then, the memory of our fight crashed down. The smile vanished, his shoulders tensed, and he abandoned his shopping cart right there between the organic kale and the prepackaged salads. I followed his retreat through the store, my heart pounding, earning startled looks from other shoppers. By the time I reached the parking garage, his car was already disappearing down the ramp, leaving me standing alone with a single bag of avocados. A security guard approached me, his expression polite but firm. "Everything okay, ma'am?" "Just missed my son," I'd said, the truth of the words aching in my chest. Now, watching his car merge into the morning traffic, I wondered if this was what it felt like for the people I used to build cases against to be observed, catalogued, reduced to a set of predictable patterns. The irony was not lost on me. The afternoons were the hardest, with nothing to watch and no legitimate reason to be in that neighborhood. I started taking long, aimless drives through the city, past the landmarks of Leo's childhood, the park where I taught him to ride his bike, the ice cream parlor where we celebrated his acceptance into college, the courthouse where he'd sometimes meet me for lunch. It all felt like an archaeological dig into a life that was no longer mine. The worst part was listening to his voicemail greeting. I'd stopped leaving messages after the first week. The sound of his cheerful, recorded voice had become too painful a reminder of what our conversations used to be. One evening, a police officer, a man about my own age, with the tired eyes of someone who'd seen too many domestic dramas, approached my parked car. "Evening, ma'am. We had a report of a suspicious vehicle." I explained that I was just waiting for someone who clearly wasn't coming. He looked from me to the high-rise and back again, his expression softening with understanding. "Might want to try a different approach," he'd suggested, not unkindly. "Sometimes giving them space is the only thing that works." Space. I had a lifetime of space stretching out before me. A long, empty highway of retirement. But I also had something else. Patience. 30 years of building cases had taught me that justice often moves at its own pace. The wedding was scheduled for this Saturday, October 19th. Just 3 days away. I'd circled the date in red on my kitchen calendar. Though no invitation had ever arrived, the crossword puzzle in front of me was a blur, 7 across. Reconciliation after conflict. 9 letters. Before I could solve it, my phone rang. Leo's name on the caller ID made my heart lurch. I answered before the second ring. "Mom." His voice was small, uncertain. "It's Leo." "Leo," I breathed, setting down my reading glasses, half afraid I was dreaming. "I'm so glad you called. The wedding is on Saturday," he said in a rush. "I know this is incredibly short notice, but Brenda's parents, they want to meet you. They're insisting on it. A family dinner before the ceremony." My chest tightened with a dizzying mix of relief and terror. Of course. I would be honored to meet them. "Really?" He sounded surprised, as if he'd been bracing for a fight. "They're very traditional. Her mother especially. She has strong opinions about family obligations." "I understand," I said, already reaching for a pen. "When and where?" "Tomorrow night. Friday. At our place. 7. He paused, and I could hear the faint sounds of an office in the background. He was calling on his lunch break, using a few precious minutes to rebuild the bridge we'd burned. "Mom, I need to ask you something." "Anything, Leo. Can you just be yourself? Not the prosecutor version of yourself. Just my mom." The request was a sharp sting, but I understood it completely. He was asking me not to interrogate his future in-laws, not to treat his fiancée like a hostile witness. He wanted the mother who bandaged his scraped knees, not the woman who cross-examined mobsters. "I'll be on my best behavior," I promised. Relief flooded his voice. "Thank you. And Mom, I'm so sorry about everything I said. You don't need to apologize. I handled everything wrong from the start." "No," he said softly. "You were just trying to protect me. I know that. I've always known that." We sat in silence for a moment, the heavy weight of the past month finally beginning to lift. "So, Friday night?" I said, steering us back to logistics. "Should I bring anything?" "Maybe a nice bottle of bourbon for Olivia, Brenda's mother. She loves a good single malt." Then his voice grew softer. "Thank you for doing this. It means everything to me. There's nowhere else I'd rather be." After we hung up, I stared at the crossword puzzle. 7 across. Reconciliation after conflict. The answer came to me in a flash. Asterisk. Peacemaking asterisk. I filled in the letters with a steady hand, then reached for my notebook. Tomorrow night's dinner required preparation, strategy, the same methodical approach I'd applied to every important case of my career. But this time, the stakes weren't about guilt or innocence. This time, I was fighting for my son's future. And for my place in it. The moment the call with Leo ended, I went into motion. 30 years of case preparation had ingrained in me the belief that success is found in the details, in the careful orchestration of information and intent. This dinner was my most important case yet. My closet was a testament to a life spent in courtrooms. Conservative suits in shades of gray and navy, understated silk blouses, shoes polished to a mirror shine. But this wasn't a trial. I needed to project quiet, respectability, not intimidation. I selected a charcoal gray pantsuit, one Leo had always liked, paired with a simple cream-colored blouse. Trustworthy, but not flashy. The image of a retired professional who understood propriety. Thursday afternoon, I drove to a specialty liquor store in the city. The owner, a man who appreciated the finer points of a good spirit, listened to my mission. A single malt for a future mother-in-law, he mused, stroking his chin. First meeting. A retired police officer, you say? Very important. He studied me for a moment. Something classic. Respectful. Not so expensive it looks like you're trying too hard. But not so cheap it looks like you don't care. Perfect. We selected a bottle of well-aged Scottish single malt. A choice that spoke of good taste and thoughtful consideration. For the father, I chose an elegant orchid arrangement from a nearby florist, sophisticated and classic. Friday was for final preparations. I took more time getting ready than I had in years, paying attention to every detail. In the mirror, I saw a woman preparing for the performance of her life, which, in a way, she was. I practiced my introductions aloud. Olivia Edward, it's a pleasure to finally meet you. A firm handshake, direct eye contact, a genuine smile. My notebook contained 3 pages of research and strategy. Brenda's mother, Olivia, a retired police officer, would likely value directness and respect for authority. Her father, Edward, a retired financial planner, would appreciate stability and prudence. Both would be fiercely protective of their daughter and deeply suspicious of the mother who had caused a month-long rift with their future son-in-law. I could not afford a single misstep. At 6:15 p.m., I stood before the hallway mirror for a final check. The grandfather clock ticked steadily, marking down the minutes to a dinner that could either restore my relationship with my son or shatter it for good. My phone buzzed. A text from Leo. Asterisk. Thank you for doing this, Mom. It means everything. Asterisk. I typed back quickly. Asterisk. See you soon, sweetheart. Asterisk. Then, I picked up the orchid, collected the carefully wrapped bottle from my kitchen counter, and walked out to my car. The October evening was crisp and clear. It was time to meet the opposition or, with any luck, my son's new family. The condominium building stood like a monument to new money, a tower of glass and steel rising above the historic streets of Streeterville. I parked my sensible sedan between a gleaming black Tesla and a silver BMW, taking one last steadying breath in the rearview mirror. The orchid sat pristine on the passenger seat, the bottle of single malt nestled beside it. This was enemy territory, and I was walking in deliberately unarmed. Brenda opened the door before I had a chance to ring the bell, her smile as sharp and practiced as a prosecutor's opening statement. Well, well, if it isn't our distinguished retiree. Good evening, Brenda, I said, extending the orchid. This is for your father. She examined the plant with a theatrical air, turning it slowly as if inspecting evidence. How thoughtful. Very traditional. Dad appreciates a nice plant. I'm not sure he's much for orchids. but I'm sure he'll appreciate the gesture. The backhanded compliment was expertly delivered. Everything was a performance with this woman, a constant effort to establish dominance through subtle condescension. "And this is for your mother," I said, offering the bottle. "Ah, a single malt," Brenda said, her eyebrows lifting slightly. "Mom's more of a wine person these days, but I'm sure she'll find a use for it. Come in, come in. Welcome to our home. Asterisk our home." Asterisk. The possessive word hung in the air. The apartment's interior screamed expense, but offered no warmth. Minimalist furniture that cost a fortune, abstract art that looked like a series of charts, and smart technology embedded in every surface. This wasn't a home, it was a showroom. "It's very impressive," I said, because a response was required. "Isn't it?" Brenda's chest puffed with pride. "Everything is custom. That sound system alone is worth more than most people's cars. But when you're in high-level IT consulting, you learn to appreciate quality." Leo emerged from a hallway, wearing a nervous but hopeful smile. "Mom." He kissed my cheek, and I could feel his relief. "Thank you for coming. I wouldn't miss it for the world, sweetheart." Brenda was already at a sleek, modern bar, pouring drinks. Scotch, wine, or perhaps something a little softer for the older generation? The condescension was relentless, as if wisdom and experience were afflictions. "Scotch is fine, thank you," I replied coolly. She handed me a heavy crystal tumbler and then launched into a tour of her possessions. The kitchen appliances imported from Germany, the bathroom fixtures from Italy, the thread count of the sheets in the guest room. "Brenda," Leo's voice held a note of warning. "Maybe Mom would like to sit down." Of course. Sorry, I just get so excited showing off the place." She gestured toward a vast leather sectional that probably cost more than my first house. "Make yourself comfortable, Catherine. Though I suppose comfort is relative when you're used to simpler accommodations." Asterisk simpler accommodations. Asterisk. My lovely Oak Park home, with its warm hardwood floors, built-in bookcases, and walls filled with family memories, was apparently a hovel in Brenda Harper's world. "I'm quite comfortable, thank you," I said, sitting down. Leo perched on the edge of a chair, his own glass trembling slightly. I could see it in his eyes. He was finally beginning to understand what I had tried to tell him that night outside the restaurant. His fiancée was a woman who measured worth in dollars and treated people like assets. "So," Brenda said, settling into a chair like a queen taking her throne, "tomorrow's the big day." Hard to believe Leo is finally ready to settle down. He's been so independent for so long. The word dripped with condescension, implying that his independence was a character flaw she had graciously corrected. "Independence is a virtue," I said quietly. "I raised him to think for himself." "Oh, absolutely. But there comes a time when thinking for yourself has to become thinking for two, right? Marriage is all about compromise, about letting the stronger partner lead." The mask was slipping, revealing the cold, controlling nature beneath the designer veneer. Just then, the doorbell chimed. "That'll be Mom and Dad," Brenda said, her face lighting up. "Time for you to meet the family." She strode to the door, and in that moment, I caught Leo's eye. He looked trapped, caught between his loyalty to this woman and the dawning, horrifying realization that his mother had been right all along. "You okay?" I mouthed silently. He gave a slight, uncertain nod, but his white-knuckled grip on his glass told a different story. Brenda's voice boomed from the entryway. "Mom, Dad, perfect timing. Come on in, come meet the family." I stood, straightened my jacket, and prepared to meet the people who had raised this arrogant, calculating young woman. Whatever happened next, I would conduct myself with the dignity my son deserved from his mother, even if his fiancée had none to offer. The front door swung open to Brenda's boisterous greeting. "There they are. "Mom, Dad, come in." Edward Harper entered first. A pleasant-looking man with a gentle demeanor and a warm smile. Behind him was Olivia Harper. She was a compact, powerfully built woman with the sharp, observant eyes of someone who had spent a lifetime assessing threats and reading situations. Her silver hair was cut in a no-nonsense style, and she moved with an unshakable confidence. "Brenda, sweetheart," Edward said, embracing his daughter. Olivia's greeting was more restrained, a firm handshake for her future son-in-law, her eyes sweeping the room in a familiar, systematic pattern. It was an old law enforcement habit cataloging exits, occupants, potential problems. Then her gaze landed on me, standing by the leather sectional with my scotch in hand. And her entire demeanor changed. The color drained from her face as if a plug had been pulled. "Mom, Dad," Brenda announced with a theatrical flourish, gesturing toward me with a smug smile. "Meet the empty space." The insult hit the room with the force of a physical blow. Leo gasped. Edward's smile faltered. But Olivia Harper's reaction was seismic. Her hand shot out and gripped Brenda's arm with the arresting force of a police officer making a bust. "Brenda." Her voice was a low, sharp command. "The kitchen. Now." "Mom, what are you?" "Now." Olivia's tone brooked no argument. It was the voice of a commander in a crisis. They disappeared into the adjoining kitchen, but the apartment's open-concept design offered no privacy. Their urgent, furious whispers carried clearly into the living room, where Edward, Leo, and I stood in a state of suspended, awkward silence. "Do you want to go to prison?" Olivia's voice was ragged with panic. "What are you talking about?" "That woman. Do you have any idea who that is?" "She's just some retiree. Leo's mom. Lives on a pension, reads books. That is former Illinois State's Attorney Catherine Reynolds." The name exploded from Olivia in a harsh whisper. "She sent half the organized crime figures in this state to federal prison. She's a legend." The silence that followed was absolute. But, she said she was retired," Brenda stammered, her voice now small and thin. "She is retired. But Catherine Reynolds doesn't stop being Catherine Reynolds just because she's not in the office anymore. That woman has connections in every single law enforcement agency from here to D.C. She could ruin you with one phone call." "Ruin me? Why would she?" Brenda's voice cracked as the terrible reality began to dawn on her. "Because you just introduced one of the most respected and feared prosecutors in the history of this state as empty space. You absolute fool." In the living room, Edward was making a valiant attempt at small talk, his host training overriding the palpable crisis. "Leo, my boy, this is a lovely place. And Catherine, it is so wonderful to finally meet you." "The pleasure is all mine, Edward," I said, my attention fixed on the drama unfolding in the kitchen. "She knows, doesn't she?" Brenda's voice was barely a whisper. "About Chicago. About the... If she doesn't know yet, she'll know by morning." Olivia snapped. "Women like Catherine Reynolds don't forget faces. And they damn sure don't forget cases. What do? You grovel. You apologize. And you pray to God that she is here tonight as a mother and not a prosecutor. And you never, ever disrespect her again." The whispering stopped. Footsteps approached. Brenda emerged first, her face as pale as marble, followed by her mother, whose expression was a mixture of fury and damage control. "Mrs. Reynolds," Olivia said, stepping forward with the measured deference of a subordinate addressing a superior officer. "I believe we may have crossed paths professionally in the past." I nodded slowly, setting my drink down with deliberate care. "It's possible, Officer Harper, though I suspect our most relevant connection is far more recent than that." Brenda stood frozen, the weight of her catastrophic miscalculation finally crashing down on her. The confident, condescending woman from moments before had vanished, replaced by someone who finally understood the stakes. Leo looked from me to Olivia and back again, confusion warring with a dawning understanding. The truth was about to come out. All of it. The silence stretched until I decided to break it with the calm authority I'd honed over 3 decades. Yes, I said, my voice carrying the weight of every case I had ever won. I was the Illinois state's attorney for 15 years. Before that, I was an assistant prosecutor for another 15. Brenda's knees seemed to buckle. She gripped the back of a chair to steady herself. But, I continued, my gaze softening as I turned to my son. I am retired now. I'm here tonight only as Leo's mother. The past is the past. Oh my heavens, Edward breathed, his hand fluttering to his chest. All those big cases on the news? That was you? Some of them, yes. Brenda finally found her voice, though it was little more than a choked whisper. Ma'am, Mrs. Reynolds, I had no idea who you were. My behavior was completely inappropriate. I was disrespectful and rude. And her voice broke. I am so sorry. The transformation was astounding. The arrogant young woman who had dismissed me as irrelevant was now standing before me, humbled and terrified. Leo stared at me with new eyes. Mom, you never told me. All these years, I just thought you were a lawyer for the state, but I never saw the need to bring my work home. I said gently. Work was work. You were my son. I kept those worlds separate. The Castellano family, Olivia said suddenly, a wave of recognition flooding her face. The municipal corruption trials in the late 90s. The racketeering cases that went on for years. That was all you. I simply nodded. You put away some of the most dangerous people this state has ever seen. She continued, her voice filled with a cop's professional respect. I worked courthouse security for 2 of those trials. I'll never forget the prosecutor who couldn't be intimidated, couldn't be bought, and refused to back down. Brenda was staring at me as if I had sprouted wings. The things that were said tonight were said by someone who didn't know any better. I said, addressing the room. I suggest we move past it. Tomorrow is Leo's wedding day. That is all that matters now. Edward, bless his heart, stepped forward with the grace that had likely seen him through countless awkward social situations. Catherine, would you do us the honor of joining us for dinner? I would love to hear the story of how you and Leo's father met. I would be delighted. The next 2 hours were a completely different reality. Brenda, humbled and quiet, asked genuine questions about the justice system. Olivia shared stories from her years on the force, speaking to me with the candor and respect of one professional to another. Edward regaled us with charming tales of raising a daughter who wanted to be a cop in Chicago. And through it all, Leo watched with a look of growing amazement, finally seeing his mother not just as an overprotective retiree, but as the woman she truly was. During dessert, Brenda stood, her hands trembling slightly. I'd like to propose a toast, she said, her voice steady, but stripped of all its earlier arrogance. To Mrs. Reynolds, who taught me a very important lesson tonight. That respect isn't given based on what you think you know about a person. It's earned through character and integrity, and having the wisdom to admit when you have been profoundly wrong. She raised her glass, to new beginnings, to family, and to the honor of learning from someone who has spent her life making the world a safer place for all of us. We all drank, and in that moment, I saw something in her I hadn't thought possible. Genuine remorse, true respect, and the flicker of a possibility that Brenda Harper might, after all, one day be worthy of my son. Later, as I was preparing to leave, Leo pulled me aside near the door. Mom, he said softly. His eyes filled with a love and understanding that had been missing for weeks. I am so sorry for everything I said. For not trusting you. For not realizing who you really are. You knew exactly who I was, I replied, touching his cheek. I was your mother. That's the only title that ever mattered. He hugged me then, a tight, desperate embrace. And for the first time in 5 long weeks, I felt like I had my son back. As I drove home through the glittering Chicago night, I reflected on justice and its many forms. Sometimes it's delivered in a courtroom with a verdict, and sometimes it arrives quietly, at a dinner table, through the simple, powerful revelation of truth. Tonight, it had been both. The wedding was tomorrow, and for the first time since this whole ordeal began, I was actually looking forward to it. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.